A former New Orleans police officer who killed 3 people back in the 90s during a shocking crime. This as Antoinette Frank is still trying to get post-conviction relief.
Attorney General Liz Murrill in her office set to be in an Orleans Parish courtroom today. They
continue to respond to post-conviction challenges by former NOPD officer Antoinette Frank. Frank is trying to avoid the death sentence handed down after her conviction in a 1995 triple murder.
Louisiana Pardon Board refuses a new clemency hearing for death row inmate Antoinette Frank. The former New Orleans police officer is the only woman on death row. She was convicted along with Rangerlaclave, and this was back in 1995 for the notorious triple murder of a fellow officer and 2 young restaurant workers in New Orleans East.
In the murderous, blood-drenched streets of New Orleans, you gotta watch behind you, but sometimes it's the person next to you who pulls the trigger. This ain't no mystery tale or Hollywood movie. This is the real-life saga of Antoinette Frank, a cold-blooded killer with a badge who flipped the whole city upside down and left bodies and betrayal in her wake. But before she became one of the most hated names in the NO, before she pulled up to that Vietnamese restaurant with a 9mm and no conscience, she came from a place nobody really expected, a small town called Opelousas, Louisiana. Now, Antoinette wasn't no New Orleans native. She was born in that little quiet country town on April the 30th of 1971. Her mama left when she was just a baby, so she was raised by her daddy, Adam Frank. But this man wasn't no gentle parent. Word on the streets was that he was a stone-cold, mentally ill control freak who ran that house like a damn prison camp. He kept Antoinette locked down, homeschooled her damn near all her life, barely let her breathe without asking permission. Man had so much psychological grip on her, people say she ain't never had a chance to grow up normal. And that right there might be where the cracks first started forming. She didn't get away from that toxic household till she was grown. Some even say that she was sexually abused. But even then, she ain't run too far. She just ran straight into the arms of another system that gave her rules and structure. She joined the New Orleans Police Department in 1993. And let me tell you something, she damn near ain't even make it through the front door. From jump, the NOPD recruitment board wasn't feeling her. Her background check raised all kinds of red flags. She failed a psyche eval not once, but multiple times. Some of them reports even said she was emotionally unstable, too fragile for high-stress situations. Ain't that wild? Imagine failing a mental test and still ending up with a gun and a badge. But in a city like New Orleans, where the corruption run deep and the NOPD was desperate for new boots on the ground, none of that even mattered. She got waved on through like it was nothing. Just another broken soul handed a weapon and told to patrol the same streets where the system failed many people. What could possibly go wrong, right? She was 22 when she hit the force, and she was green as fuck. But it didn't take her long to find her way into some foul business. It started at that little spot on Bullitt Avenue, Kim An Restaurant, Vietnamese family-owned. Quiet joint, nothing fancy. The owners, the Vu family, was tight-knit and hard-working. The son, 24-year-old Quang Vu, was working double shift trying to help his people stack bread. They trusted the NOPD so much they even let off-duty officers do paid security at the restaurant. That's how Antoinette first got connected. Now let's talk about that other piece of the puzzle, Rangerlaclave. This was a 19-year-old baby-faced dope boy from the New Orleans East. Wild, reckless, and looking for a come-up. Him and Antoinette started messing around on the low, but this wasn't no casual thing. It was locked in, ride or die type toxic. He was supposed to be a cop, he was a convicted felon, and they was moving like Bonnie and Clyde. She'd bring him around the precinct like it was sweet, even letting him sit in her patrol car, ride with her during shifts. Her supervisors tried to pull her aside, warn her, but she wasn't trying to hear none of it. By early 1995, the two of them was knee-deep in dirt. Antoinette had already started stealing from the evidence room. Cash, guns, dope, whatever she could get her hands on. And she knew the Vu family kept money in that restaurant. It wasn't no bank vault, but it was enough to catch attention. That's when her and Rogers started plotting. March 4th, 1995, the night that all went down, the plan was supposed to be quick. In and out, get the cash, bounce. But when you dealing with 2 loose cannons and a loaded weapon, shit don't ever go smooth as planned. First, Antoinette dropped Rogers off near the back of Kim An. He drove off like she didn't know nothing, then circled back to the front like she was just checking in on duty. Officer Ronald Williams, her partner that night, was already inside. Cool, calm, sitting down eating a plate of food. Dude wasn't expecting no setup. But while While she inside playing it normal, Roger slipped through the back with a 9mm and lit the place up. First, he ran up on Officer Williams and shot him point blank, killed him where he sat. Antoinette was right there when it happened, and she ain't blink, ain't scream, ain't even flinch, just stepped right over his dying body like it was trash on the floor. Then they turned to the Vu family. They lined him up, Quang Vu, his sister Chow, and another family member, Hao Vu. They were scared out of their minds, pleading, crying, telling Antoinette he trusted you, but she ain't care. He pistol whipped them, dragged them to the back cooler, and made them kneel. Then her and Rogers opened fire. Quang and Ha died instantly. Chow somehow survived, even with bullets in her, played dead, laid there in the blood of her people, while Antoinette and Rogers ran through the register and pockets looking for cash. Get this, after the shooting, Antoinette had the nerve to come back to the scene like she was responding to the crime. She got on the radio, called it in, and tried to act like she ain't have nothing to do with it. She even started directing traffic outside the crime scene, trying to cover her tracks. But that act didn't last long. Avu, the survivor, identified both her and Rogers immediately. Told detectives everything, who did it, what they said, how they lined them up like animals. To the media, NOPD acted as if they were shook. One of their own, a cop, had the whole city thinking they couldn't believe it. But if you from the NO, you know that shit is cap. It took less than 48 hours to break that case wide open. Antoinette tried to play dumb at first, like she ain't know what was going on. Then she blamed Rogers, then tried to flip it again and say she was scared for her life. For most delusional people who covered this case, it would even insinuate that it was her brother instead. But the evidence was stacked so high, she ain't stand a chance. Ballistics, witness testimony, even blood on her shoes. It was a wrap. It charged both her and Rangerlaclave with first-degree murder, 3 counts each.
Convicted on 3 counts of capital murder along with ex-NOPD officer Antoinette Frank. The duo both sentenced to die for killing Frank's fellow police officer Ronald Williams and 2 members of the family that owned the restaurant they were robbing.
And trust is here. The people of the NO wasn't playing. They said she was out for blood. A cop killing another cop, along with 2 innocent civilians. Even some hardcore killers would draw the line. At that point, that was the line. The same system that ignored all the warning signs when she joined the force was now ready to throw her under the jail. The trial kicked off in September 1995, and it was brutal. Prosecutors laid it all out. How she failed psyche evals, how she smuggled her boyfriend into police spaces, how she stood by while he executed Officer Williams, and how she personally pulled the trigger on the Vu siblings. Antoinette sat there cold-faced the whole time. No emotion, no tears, nothing. When the verdict dropped, it was unanimous. Guilty, sentenced to death. One of the rare times a female cop in America got sentenced to the needle. But that wasn't the end of it. After the trial, the city was still buzzing. The streets was talking, and the people couldn't believe how deep the betrayal went. A police officer turning into a cold-blooded killer? That left a scar on the department that still ain't never healed. In typical corrupt fashion, NOPD tried to save face, but everybody already knew. They lit a walking red flag, joined their ranks, ignored every warning, and gave her the power to kill. Even worse, they put her in a position where she was supposed to protect those very people she gunned down. Now Rangerlaclave, he got hit with that same first-degree murder charge. No mercy. The jury ain't hesitate with him either. They handed down that sentence like it was nothing. He been fighting appeals ever since, saying his trial was unfair, saying Antoinette ran the whole thing. That ain't changed the outcome. He's still sitting behind bars at Angola, rotting.
Development today at Orleans Parish Criminal District Court. A judge decided that Rangerlaclave will not die for his crimes.
You may recall Lacaz was sentenced to death back in 1995 for the killing of an NOPD officer and 2 others at a restaurant. WDSU's Jennifer Crockett has the story.
Rangerlaclave's conviction on 3 murder charges still stands, but his death sentence was replaced today following decades of appeals. He will now serve life in prison without parole.
But Antoinette, he went down in history. She became one of the only 2 women sitting on Louisiana's death row. That cell on the women's wing at the Louisiana Correctional Institute for Women in St. Gabriel became her permanent home. She began sitting there since 1995, eating off a tray, staring at concrete walls, knowing every single appeal she files just another delay before that needle come calling.
Pardon board refuses a new clemency hearing for death row inmate Antoinette Frank. The former New Orleans police officer is the only woman on death row. She was convicted along with Rangerlaclave, and this was back in 1995 for the notorious triple murder of a fellow officer and two young restaurant workers in New Orleans East. So Frank was one of 56 inmates on death row seeking clemency before Governor John Bel Edwards leaves office on January 8th.
Now let's talk about that death row. He spends 23 hours a day locked in a tiny ass cell. 1 hour of rec if the guards feel like letting her stretch her legs. No TV, no commissary snacks like the rest of the general population. It's time, and a lot of it. Been in that box for decades, longer than some of the kids she helped bury that night had even been alive. And she's still claiming she's innocent, trying to flip the script. Still saying she was scared and manipulated by Rogers, but the courts ain't buying it. Every appeal gets slapped down. In 2007, the Louisiana Supreme Court reviewed her case again. Same result. That stands. In 2015, same thing. She tried every single angle. Ineffective counsel, mental illness, prosecutorial misconduct. Judges was like, nope, nope, and hell no. And now, fast forward to recent years. Antoinette back in the headlines again. Not because of no new evidence, not because anybody found DNA or fingerprints clearing her name. Nah, she back in the news because of the push to end the death penalty in Louisiana altogether. Yep, there's been real movement in the state, especially with groups like the Promise of Justice Initiative, trying to get the needle tossed out for good. They pushing clemency for damn near everybody on death row, including Antoinette Frank. And that right there got people heated. In 2023, word started spreading that the Louisiana State Board of Pardons and Committee on Parole might consider reviewing cases for clemency hearings, even death row cases. Antoinette's name was suddenly back on the table. Survivors of the victims, like the Vu family, they came out strong. It was like, hell no, she don't deserve no break. She deserves to die, just like she killed our people. Our Vu, the one who survived that massacre, been vocal for years. She never wavered, said from day one that Antoinette was the devil in uniform. Said if Louisiana ever backed off that sentence, it would be a slap in the face to every victim of violent crime. And the family of Officer Ronald Williams, same thing. They showed up to hearings, wrote statements, made damn sure the board knew exactly what kind of monster they was dealing with. And let's not forget what surfaced during the hearings, how deep her manipulation really ran. Turns out, during her time on the force, Antoinette wasn't just dating Lacaz. She was helping run street-level crimes while wearing a badge, letting him use her patrol car, bringing him around the precinct like he was untouchable. Supervisors filed complaints. One officer even reported her for bringing Lacaz to a double homicide scene. But NOPD leadership, again, brushed it off. The same negligence that got her hired is the same negligence that let her operate with impunity. The system built her into what she became, but they wasn't about to claim her once the blood hit the flow. Now check this out. In 2024, her legal team made another desperate move. They filed for post-conviction relief based on newly discovered evidence, claimed there was inconsistencies in the ballistics, claimed Rogers might have been the sole shooter, claimed that racial bias impacted the jury selection. They were swinging wild, trying anything to break that sentence down. But again, no dice. Courts said all that had already been addressed back in '95, and again in every appeal since. Antoinette ain't going nowhere. While all that legal maneuvering going on, guess what surfaced? Old interviews, prison correspondence, even artwork by Antoinette started getting circulated online. Yeah, she been drawing, making little pastel pictures from inside that row. Flowers, doves, peace signs. Some people even tried to say she had changed, that she had found God. She deserved a second chance. But the family of her victims, they wasn't trying to hear none of that. Because how did you find peace when you executed people who trusted you? Quang Vu and Ha Vu died with their hands tied. Officer Williams died in his uniform. This ain't no accident. This ain't no moment of weakness. That's calculated murder. And even decades later, Antoinette ain't never truly apologized, never wrote no letters to the families, never sat in front of a camera and said she did it. It's more denial, more legal motions, more time wasting.
Death row for more than 30 years now will be allowed to challenge her sentence.
3 decades after Antoinette Frank was sentenced to death for a triple murder in New Orleans East, a judge granted the former NOPD officer a new day in court. The death row inmate was arrested for shooting and killing a fellow police officer and 2 others during a robbery in March of 1995.
That's why the people of Louisiana, especially the NO, still remember her name like it just happened last week. She ain't just a killer. She is a symbol of a system that failed from every angle: recruitment, supervision, training, and accountability. And if you really want to understand how wild it is, think about this. Antoinette Frank had a badge, a patrol car, and legal protection, all while plotting armed robberies and murder with her boyfriend. That ain't just a tragedy, that's a damn indictment. So what's next? Well, as of now, she's still sitting on death row, still filing motions, still drawing flowers while the clock ticks. Louisiana still got the death penalty on the books, so there's been no execution since 2010. Now, with all the political pressure and clemency pushes, there's a real chance that death row inmates like Antoinette and get their sentences commuted to life. That decision could come down any month now. But whether she lives or dies inside that prison, one thing for sure, 2 things for certain: the city of New Orleans will never forget what she did, because on a dark night in 1995, inside a little Vietnamese restaurant on Bullitt Avenue, Antoinette Frank showed us exactly what happens when a wrong person gets handed a badge and nobody checks them till it's too damn late